Let's go to Chicago, where the Bulls are no longer undefeated, but are still having a really nice start to the year.
Yeah, the Chicago Bulls are 5-1. The home and home to the Knicks. They finally took an L. They are 6.1 net rating. That's seventh in the NBA, fifth on offense, and 10th on defense. They project for, oh, stop me if you've heard this before, Danny, 40-42, which would be the 10th seed. This per ESPN's BPI, 34% chance of making the playoffs. So, how much of the strong start you compiled these before they lost the Knicks today is real or sustainable?
I thought it was interesting. Despite the 5-0 start, both BPI and Dunks and Threes were extremely skeptical of the Bulls. And they were also, it's worth noting, of the San Antonio Spurs. The Spurs were the Dunks and Threes had the Bulls as the number 18 team in the league, and the Spurs as 19. Both those teams were undefeated going into Sunday. Both of them lost on Sunday. And Chicago doesn't get the strength of schedule demerit that the Spurs have. The Spurs just haven't really played anybody. The Bulls have. They've largely played teams at, you can't say full strength, but at normal strength. So they played the Kings and they didn't have Keegan Murray, but they had Sabonis, they had all the normal guys. They beat the Pistons at normal strength. The only big absence that they benefited from was they blew out the Magic in Orlando in a game Jalen Suggs did not play. And Jalen Suggs has made a big difference. He's not playing a ton of minutes. And so that was something that intrigued me. And I mean, some of that with BPI, we know that it relies on the prior. And the prior for both of us, even though I picked the Bulls over, was about their overall talent level. And so I was really interested in kind of what the tension with that and everything else. And so one of the
Yeah,
big
yeah. Well, quickly, those stats you mentioned, dunks and threes and BPI, those are still somewhat indexed on what they think the team's talent
exactly.
level is assembled prior to this season.
Exactly. And so that's tethering some of this, and those can be right. There's a reason why preseason expectations matter for some of these models we respect going into the season. It's because that still has weight. We'll see where things go. The another thing that good models can go into is is what they're doing sustainable, or is there something unusual? And there is something pretty significant for the Bulls. It has toned down in recent games, especially the two that they played against the Knicks, but they were benefiting early in the season from ludicrously lucky opponent 3-point shooting. So Bulls opponents take the fewest threes in the league, just 30% of their attempts, which is about 8% of shots lower than the league average. But Bulls opponents before the Knicks games were making 26% of their threes, going into Sunday shooting 30%. And so that's going to improve. That's just something that's going to change. And even with them taking few attempts, like it's just the sample is going to bear out. That's just not the way these things work out. So that is something that will adjust. And the Knicks are the Knicks have they've kind of progressed that to the mean to an extent. And that doesn't, the stats that I was mentioning, like them being the Bulls being 10th at defense, doesn't include the Knicks shooting 20 of 42 from three on Sunday. That will of course, actually that does factor that in, just doesn't factor into my stats. And so that's one part of it. Okay, that's gonna change. The thing that I found absolutely fascinating with the Bulls, and I'll keep this mostly on the defense, but it will connect with the offense, is okay, the Bulls are giving up the fewest three-pointers in the league. Those are some of the most damaging shots in the league. However, the Chicago Bulls are second to last in opponent location effective field goal percentage. I'm like, okay, that's really weird. They're giving up the fewest threes. How could they possibly still be giving up the second healthiest shot diet in the league? And the answer is truly incredible shot frequency for opponents at the rim.
Yeah, it's pretty insane. 43% of opponent shots are within 4 feet. So that's 2% higher than second worst. Brooklyn league average is 32%. And that's offensive rating's been up a little bit. Some of that is more shooting at the rim this year. Some of that is that free throws are up. So fewest threes in the league, most shots at the rim. And that's that location, field goal percentage. That doesn't even consider the effectiveness from each of those ranges. And opponents are shooting a crazy high as well at the rim. over 70%. Nikola Vucevic, their center, allows 72.8%, or sorry, 71.8% shooting at the rim when he is contesting. That's
Interesting.
and their center is not contesting a lot of these. I think he's really struggled with even just like getting net, despite the fact that he's huge and he fights hard on the boards. Like he just gets kind of knocked backwards on a lot of these fights. He also does a good job of not fouling, which is part of that. Now, the one thing I can say is that even if you are giving up makes at the rim, they are so good at running, and we can talk about that a little bit momentarily. But at least if the opponent is making a shot at the rim or missing a shot at the rim, that you still it's easier to run off of that. So that at least helps their offensive game. So that's something to keep in mind as well.
And
yeah.
And the Bulls, to their credit, they're doing some of the other stuff that can help out your defense. They're giving up. They're not getting killed in transition. The points per possession is a little bit higher than you'd like. But the other thing that they're doing, you brought up the shots around the rim, is that the Bulls are defensive rebound, and so they're getting out of possession. So they're giving up shots sometimes in dangerous area, but they're not giving up a lot of second chances or second chance opportunities, which is very good for them. And when you can do that and get out on the break, which they are, then that can be really dangerous.
Yeah, and so fast break is a big reason why they are taking as many shots at the rim as they are giving up. 42.5% of their attempts. Again, that's 10 percentage points above league average. They're taking the fewest long twos in the league. Josh Giddey used to be kind of a long two floater machine. He's getting to the basket a lot more. The fast break is really helping. And they're also taking the 7th most corner threes. So that's and the way that they're doing it, we talked about it pretty extensively for those who haven't listened to it. The Knick game on Friday, where Nikola Vucevic is spacing out. He's having a great shooting season so far. They've got 48 minutes of 5-out spacing, basically, with Jalen Smith, since Zach Collins hasn't been available so far this season. And they have guys who can get to the basket. Like Ayo Dosunmu has been excellent in that role. Modest Buzelis is good attacking off the dribble. So it's not quite as the way that the Heat are doing it in terms of just not interacting, because Giddey is a pretty good pick and roll player. Vucevic likes to pick and pop as well, but they're very good at getting into stuff quickly. They're kind of doing more, I would say, closer to Pacers type of stuff, where guys are interacting quickly, slipping out, moving the ball fast, pushing the ball up as well. And so they're driving, getting to the basket is pretty good. And then they're at least in some of the other factors where they were just terrible last year. They're not awesome, but they've gotten more respectable, and that's helped to boost them as well.
Going from 28th to 19th in offensive rebounding, that's giving you a lot of good opportunities. And one that really is intriguing me is that the Bulls, they were second to last year in getting to the free throw line. Now they're 21st. That's a lot better. Again, it's an improvement off of being really poor. And so I was wondering, well, who's getting to the line? And Josh Giddey, last year, he attempted 3.8 free throws per 36 minutes, and that was a career high. This year, before Sunday's game, 7.5 per 36.
Yeah.
So he's doing a lot more. And then in the game against the Knicks, he only got 2, so that will lower his attempt rate. So that's big. Also, Modest Buzelis, who was the first guy I thought of, he's over 4 per 36, playing a fair amount this year. But also Trae Jones, 5 per 36. And then 2 bench guys, Kevin Huerter and Jalen Smith, they're around 5 free throw attempts per 36, playing fewer minutes, but getting that off your bench. And so it is a team effort. It's still not Nikola Vucevic, because it never is Nikola Vucevic drawing fouls, but they have this coming for other players. And with Giddey, it's absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, and Josh Giddey, I'm sure we'll talk more about him if he keeps this up. He really has been excellent, and their fast-breaking style, he's looked great in that. But he has added some tricks. A lot of the fouls that he's drawing are just these field contact plays, or where he's initiating the contact some. It's not, he really didn't draw contact at all, given how often he drove it, especially during his OKC days. And credit him for just finding ways to make that a priority, because he'll make open spot ups now. I think it's getting to the point where I trust him to do that. He's not going to take threes off the dribble, necessarily, and he still is going to take some floaters. He's not an unbelievable finisher, so he needed to find a way to get himself more efficient, and the free throw line early on appears to be that. So we will hold in abeyance are they for real judgment. I mean, obviously the defense is not just to the opponent 3-point shooting. The more durable factors on defense are the ones that are worse for them, and the more ephemeral ones are the ones that are good. You don't like that combination, but we'll do a whole episode on this later. But certainly there are some things to feel good about with Chicago, and their best offensive player, at least the guy we thought would be coming into the season, it may not be the case anymore. Kobe White hasn't even played for them yet. Let's turn to the 4-2 Detroit Pistons. They are 10th in net rating at plus 3.1. Their offense is 16th. Their defense is 7th. BPI likes them for the 4 seed, 46 and 36. Noteworthy that the Bulls are projected for the 10 seed with 40 wins. Detroit, the 4 seed, for 46 wins. BPI definitely sees the Eastern Conference as pretty bunched up, but 81% chance of making the playoffs for them. Any news to discuss here, or any interesting stats that stand out before we get into some of the other main observations about this group?
Wanted to note that, especially with the absence of Jaden Ivey, that Marcus Sasser hasn't played yet this season. He's been dealing with this hip issue, and he is already ruled out for Monday's game against the Grizzlies. So they're doing this without the person we expected to be their backup slash combo point guard, and they're doing it without the backup to their backup, which is really impressive for the Pistons. And they're 16th on offense. Despite that, that's pretty impressive. And then the other thing, I'll bring this in over the course of both of us will over the course of this pod, but we've been using it for years. This great resource from Christian Arsu about basically how many games you need for the initial sample to pass an R squared of 0.5 with the team's end of season number. So basically, once you get to the point where half or more of the eventual outcome can be seen in the data. Is that a good summary of that?
Yeah, essentially that it's more than 50% of what you're seeing is random.
And
so yeah, good.
And so where you start with that, the things that stabilize first are largely play type for your team, and then eventually you get some in terms of play type with the other team. So the elements that are kind of getting to that vaunted R squared of 0.5 at this juncture, so pace, your own 3-point attempt rate, your own free throw attempt rate, assist percentage, and then right around where we are, 7 games, opponent 3-point attempt rates. That's significant for the Bulls. We just talked about them having the lowest 3-point attempt rate in the league. And then that ties in a little bit with, 3-point attempt rate with the Pistons, who it's their own 3-point attempt rate, not opponents. As of this morning, Sunday morning, the Pistons are taking the third lowest 3-point attempt rate of a proportion of their attempts. League average is 38.3. They're at 31.2. Bottom 10 in both arc threes and corner threes.
Yeah, but yet they are 16th on offense. Big way that they are doing that is through 32% offensive rebounds. Jalen Duren, who we'll talk about more in a second, 19% offensive rebounds. Isaiah Stewart spending a little bit more time at the arc, 11% offensive rebounds, but you still have guys like Asar Thompson or Ron Holland. They're playing a lot of guys who don't really shoot, but then those guys are hanging around the basket more, and they're just athletic. The one guy they have who has been shooting it is Duncan Robinson. He's at least hitting 40% so far. Again, very early to cite that number. More salient is 7 threes per 36, which that is not quite. It's a little bit more than half of the rate that Malik Beasley had in terms of threes per 36 a year ago. Jalen Duren was fascinating to me, though. I wanted to look at him more closely because he is essentially keeping this Pistons offense afloat by himself from a statistical standpoint. If you're just looking at the overall efficiency, like who is efficient, 71% true shooting is awesome. The league average is usually in the 57, 58%. But he also has 25% usage. And someone like him to be that efficient while also that high usage, which is almost like second guy on the team usage, is really incredible. Now, it'd be nice if he could stay on the floor. He's averaging 5.6 fouls per 36, and his backup, Isaiah Stewart, is averaging 6.1. So good thing they have Paul Reed, who's saved them a number of times. That 90% offensive rebounding for Duren, he actually puts them back. He averages 1.25 points per play. And then a lot of what he's doing is just being incredibly efficient, finishing opportunities that he's set up for. So on 14 dump offs or cuts to the basket, 1.6 points per play, 12 pick and roll man possessions, and spoiler alert, he's rolling to the basket. 1.33 points per play. The one thing that's, not only though is it, I mean, you don't get to 25% usage just on that stuff. Like part of it is the offensive rebounds and then the ability to put them back immediately, right? Like Donovan Mitchell gets a lot of offensive rebounds too. Steven Adams gets a lot of offensive rebounds too, but they're not going to put them back the same way that the athletic Jalen Duren is. And he's still, even if you're looking at roll man stuff, he's just a bigger target. He can go get alley-oops. If he's in the dunker spot on the baseline, you could throw it up to him. So he's able to generate more of these extremely efficient shots. And they have pretty good passers on this team to get him the ball, even if the spacing is not great. Probably the biggest new trick for me with him, though, is likes to do a few ISOs. He had 8 of them on the year, but it's looking smooth. Like he's always had this kind of latent skill level. And we're like, all right, is this just a party trick? He just dribbles between his legs to drew the ball up every now and again. He's starting to actually make it more practical now. A lot of it is working out of the handoff game. He tortured Goga Batadze twice on those plays where he's able to go between the legs. He broke his ankles with an inside-out dribble and got right to the basket. So if he's getting it at 17 feet, one dribble move, and then he can get to the basket and finish. He blew by Jarrett Allen. And again, this is kind of these, hey, he's looking to hand off. There's nobody there, but the center is usually on him. He's usually at the top. So there's not great help principles there of somewhere to send him or somewhere to bring a helper from. And the Pistons will be involved in some sort of screening action or handoff action, usually on either side of the floor. And so he can decide if nothing is there to go at a guy. So he had this beautiful between the legs, got right past Jarrett Allen, just smoked the layup when I can't remember who it was that came over and bothered him a little bit. So that handle looks pretty smooth for Jalen Duren. And while I've kind of scoffed at the idea of him being worth $30 million a year, and I don't think he's going to put up 71% true shooting on 25 usage all season. If he does, that's a very, very valuable offensive player, particularly in this offense. We'll talk about the rim protection there in a second too, because the Pistons have been great in that area. But if he can keep this up, that might not be totally insane. I think the Pistons made the right move by making him earn it. Then Ron Holland. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was going to mention, I mean, so with Duren, I love that you brought up the ISOs because it's something that I've seen, watching the Pistons throughout the season, is that Duren has always been more intriguing to me when he has a quickness advantage, but you have to develop something to really harness that as a big. Like you can't, and like a basic dribble, a basic handle is a way to do that. And so particularly when you're facing a little bit more of a slow-footed guy, somebody who's maybe their attention is going in other directions because of their help responsibilities, you don't need to do it 10 times a game. But if you do it 2 times a game, you're great.
Yeah, and it also just keeps the defense honest as well, so your handoff stuff can work a little bit better. Ron Holland, not to lock in on him too much, but he's taken 6.6 threes per 36. That's like totally fine for a small forward. He's making 30% at this early juncture. He's been a career 76% free throw shooter now. So I think he's on the path to me to not being a total non-shooter. I never thought his jumper looked totally busted. Obviously, the numbers last year were absolutely atrocious. But I credit him for just continuing to work. Now, Asar Thompson is in a different boat, right? Like, I don't think he's ever going to be a shooter.
I mean, Asar, Holland, I'll put it out there. Asar Thompson, by comparison, 2.4 threes per 36 this year, making 27%. That 27% is markedly better than he's done before, but still bad.
Yeah. So if Ron Holland could be on the road, and I don't think he'll still not get guarded. Like that'll be the scouting report for some time here. But let's say he becomes not a total non-shooter. Maybe he's, a 35% guy on 6 per 36. That's like reasonable enough for a small forward. So then you got Cade Asar is probably your 4. Holland's probably your 3. Duren, and then 2 guard X. Maybe that ends up being your team because the Pistons, we thought they needed more talent. In the end, it turned out they actually gave that pick up to what eventually became Minnesota. That was Joan Beranger. So they're not going to be good or bad enough to have another major guy coming in. The other way a major guy could come in, of course, is through trade, and maybe Holland would be part of that, or maybe it'd be their future draft picks. Isaiah Stewart is also helping a little bit. I talked with Bryce and Amari. Bryce Simon and Amari Sankofa before the season about the Mendoza line of centers being about 4 per 36. Stewart is that 3.8 per 36. Still early. He's also shooting 45% from 2, which is not great. But he is spacing out more. He usually is way above this. His 11% offensive rebounds, but that actually shows that he's spacing out a little bit more. And then he remains one of the league's best statistical rim protectors as well. He is just fantastic at that. And Jalen Duren is doing well too. So as a team, Detroit is allowing only 54% shooting at the rim. And that's first by 2% over San Antonio. And then number 3, OKC, is at 60%. So it won't be sustainable for them to do that all season. But they're also only allowing 27.8% of opponent shots there. That's 5th in the NBA. So that number is going to regress a little bit in terms of the opponent shooting percentage. But that is a great foundation for a defense to have that kind of rim protection. And I think for Detroit to get to where they want to be this season in the regular season, they got to maintain this 7th or so on defense. And that rim protection is a great place to start in that regard.
It's foundational for them, but they do have the talent to keep that going. And even if 54% is unsustainable, they can be one of the better teams in rim protection. They have these two. And then Paul Reed is a better third center than almost any team has. So they have a lot of things going for them. We could go to another team that's going to need to rely on defense in at least the short term, and that is the Atlanta Hawks. The Hawks are 3-4 on the season, 24th in net rating, negative 4.5 per 100 possessions. 26th on offense, 21st on defense, and BPI projects them to finish with the 7 seed, 45 wins, and gives them a 76% chance of making the playoffs. Unfortunately, Dr. Nate was right, and Trae Young is going to be out about a month.
Yeah, it is in fact a grade 2 MCL sprain to be reevaluated in 4 weeks. That is generally a 6 to 8 week injury. Surgery not required. Apparently, everything else is intact from what's been reported. You never know these days, but the only other thing that might have been a concern would have been the medial meniscus. Generally, though, those MCL tears from that outward crashing in, or that guy crashing into the outside of the knee, those are usually end up being pretty clean, and that they're just MCL tears. But we've seen guys even need a brace when they come back. So it's going to be some time. It's going to be 2 months, I think, before Trae is back. Certainly playing at a high level. So we're a couple of now games into this era without Trae. They did have to play without him down the end of the 24 season when he had a broken hand. He came back, wasn't quite himself, and they lost to the Bulls in the play-in. But what did you see from their game tonight against Cleveland? A 117-109 loss for the Hawks.
I thought we got against a capable opponent. The Cavs were missing Darius Garland, they were missing Jared Allen, and they were missing Sam Merrill. But still, the Cavs are still a very capable team. I thought we saw some of the theory of the case for how the Hawks can still win games and even win games against good teams. And really, they're going to do that through their defense and transition. The Cleveland Cavaliers averaged below 0.8 points per half-court play in this game. And so that's usually good enough to win. And the Cavs were ineffective largely on second chance opportunities. They got some offensive rebounds. Their offensive rebound rate was 29% in the game, but they weren't able to put those back. Mobley missed a couple, various different people. And I thought that the Hawks, so they had this early stretch, and I'll talk about how and why this happened, where they were giving up a lot more, and that was mostly in transition because of their turnovers, which I'll discuss. But the Hawks there was this stretch in the middle of the first quarter where they were still trailing by double digits because the Cavs went up 16-2 at the beginning of the game. But it's like, oh, the Cavs aren't getting good looks. The Cavs aren't really scoring that much. It's just that the Hawks were kicking the ball all around the gym. And then that really became the dynamic for almost the rest of the game until Donovan Mitchell took the Cavs home at the end. They are really, really tough to score against in a couple of different things. So one is they have consistent size. They're playing not only at the 5, they're playing Porzingis and Onyeka Okongwu. Mostly in this game, they were staggered from each other, but they have at times played them together. But now that Zachary Rissache's back, I thought he had a pretty good defensive game, and then he had some nice offensive moments as well. But they have Risache and Jalen Johnson as the forwards, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Dyson Daniels as the guard. So even though Dyson Daniels is, I think that his steals belie like some of his flaws. Like they make him seem like a better overall defender than he is. He's very good at that, and that came up with Donovan Mitchell. But there aren't any weak points to attack. There are a lot of players who can help and who can support. And so there were these long stretches of the game, particularly when Mitchell was off the floor, but they happened throughout, where Cleveland just couldn't get anything going in the half court. And that, I think, will be true. I think that, and not having Trae helps, but that was kind of the bones of why I believed that the Hawks were going to be this dangerous team, the 4th best team in the East before the season started. And so that, I think, is true. Like, I think, how much that affects game in, game out, we're going to have to really see. And then the theory of the case, why I said that matters, is because at the best moments for Atlanta, that fueled their transition. And so their transition frequency in this game wasn't nearly as high as Cleveland, in part because of the turnovers that I'll talk about later on. But when they got out in transition, I think that a lot of their players, their games really sing. That's where Jalen Johnson's shooting limitations don't really matter. Risache had a gorgeous cross-court pass in transition out there to Kevin Huerter, or sorry, Luke Kennard, different shooter. For a 3, like that sort of thing can work really well. And Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Dyson Daniels, they're not traditional point guards, but if the floor is open, the floor is a little bit broken, they can find some stuff. So I think that even though they lost this game, the template for how the Hawks will win, and especially how they can win against teams that are worse than the Cavs, and they'll have some of those games moving forward, is just wrecking them when that team is on offense, using that to get enough feedback loops to survive when the Hawks are on offense.
Yeah, I see the template for how they can win games, and Cleveland, I think, is still a pretty good team. Donovan Mitchell came back in this one, and from the I think it was a 1 or 2 game absence for a hamstring issue, and he was absolutely brilliant in the second half, where he scored 24 points. So it was a template for how they could win, maybe in some of their more successful moments against a different team. It's a template for how they could lose too, with that 6-24 3-point shooting. Cleveland had 104 true shots to 92 for Atlanta. And a big part of that was the turnovers. The Hawks had 22 turnovers and Cleveland had 12 steals. And so I only turned this on with about 10 minutes ago. I watched the end of it, and Luke Kennard was out there, and I was like, I don't, if he's out there, something must have went wrong. So I went back and looked at it, because that made them really too vulnerable defensively, right? If their calling card is going to be defense, Alexander Walker, Jalen Johnson, Risache, Daniels, Porzingis, that group should be able to lock down. You throw a Kongu in there, maybe in some of those groups too. Well, here's your problem. With Nickeil Alexander-Walker on the floor and Luke Kennard off, the Cleveland Cavaliers had 7 steals in 12 minutes and 50 seconds, and it was just a complete disaster for their offense. And Cleveland, for the game, had 22 points off of steals directly. They had 42 transition points to 21 for the Hawks. The Hawks also are, Jalen Johnson can push it, but Trae has been pretty good at hit-ahead stuff. Transition plays only 18, which is a pretty low number. And the Hawks have been really good in those unpredictable metrics of time to shot all season. But if without Trae, I think that's going to go down. Cleveland also a disciplined team. I get that. But they really just got totally destroyed in the floor game. And that's where you can't have that happen when you're supposed to be this super hard playing athletic team and you can't get a defensive rebound. You, like, that starting group just really, really struggled for them.
I mean, Yeah, I mean they got it was a disaster at the very beginning of the game. They got trucked on a 16-2 run that included, I believe, 4 turnovers. They had 4 turnovers in the first 3 minutes. 3 of those, I believe, were live ball steals, and they were kicking the ball over the gym. And they were doing some where it was even where it was they were there were forced and unforced errors in that early stretch by the Hawks. There were a couple of rushed passes, but then there were some where it's like, oh, that guy was supposed to be there, and they weren't. And so it's going to be something that Quinn Snyder has to reconcile because, as far as I can tell, they don't really have anybody else that can that on the roster right now that can really step in. They can't change their identity internally, but that's part of why they played Luke Kennard as much as they did, and they were +5 at his minutes. But I think some of that's because his minutes were during some of the times that Donovan Mitchell was out, and that's when the Hawks defense was totally suffocating. But they're gonna have to do better, and they did. But it's just they have these they have these advantages, but those advantages don't matter if you're giving the other team transition looks.
Yeah, and then Donovan Mitchell was going after Kennard at the end, but they needed Kennard out there. Kennard played all of his 31 minutes and 46 seconds as the point guard because I'm classifying him as the point guard, but none of them are truly the point guard in some of those units. But then he can be attacked. And Evan Mobley finished the game at center. That caused problems for the Porzingis and Kennard duo, who they went to try to get matched up against Mitchell and Mobley and largely succeeded. Did you have any other Hawks observations, or did you want to give us a few on the Cavs?
Let's see. So I think that there was Dyson Daniels only took 1 3. It was a totally clean catch and shoot, and it barely hit front rim. That continues to be a major concern for him.
Yeah, 24 attempts is atrocious.
It's horrible, and they weren't turning down a ton, but they were just kind of flowing their offense. It was kind of like they were ignoring the existence of the 3-point line at different points in time, and they're running a lot of it through Jalen Johnson. Most of that works. He's a talented passer, but the Cavs did a good job understanding what the Hawks' limitations were and just sealing down the paint. That helped really slow them down. I mean, I brought up how the Cavs half-court offense wasn't great in this one, in part because of the defense. The Hawks did work their way to a little bit below a point per half-court play, but it was kind of through a mixture of things. They were able to, when they were able to get cuts to the basket and things like that could kind of work well. They had a little bit more activity. The player movement got better in the second quarter in particular, but it's going to be a real challenge for them to kind of get those good looks, manufacture that stuff in the half court.
Let's talk about the Cleveland Cavaliers now, and it's been a little bit of a rough go. They got blown out in Boston. Then they were without Donovan Mitchell in that loss to the Raptors in the NBA Cup. So they're 4-3, 13th in net rating at 1.1, 24th on offense. That's the biggest thing that stands out to me so far. 5th on defense. Probably not getting to the 59 wins that I picked them for, but BPI still likes them to go for 53, which would be, in their opinion, the 1 seed, 99% chance of making the playoffs. Darius Garland, hopefully a return from him will be on the horizon. Getting Mitchell back, it really was important as well. In terms of their transition game, they have the 6th fastest time to shot overall. That's impressive without Garland. Lonzo, I think, has helped some with that, but they still don't have just that one great push it down your throat guy. Sometimes having someone like Mobley who can bring the ball up is helpful as well. They still are getting those threes up. 47% of their shots, even if they don't have the same level of shooters, missing Garland and Ty Jerome, who are probably their 2 best shooters a year ago. Sam Merrill has been in and out of the lineup too, but they're number 2 in the percentage of shots as arc threes, number 12 in corner threes. So what do you say about this game against Atlanta where they were able to curb a 2-game losing streak?
It really does start with Donovan Mitchell, and coming off the hamstring issue, you wondered what he was going to do. And Mitchell did not do a lot around the basket. He took 5 free throws, but he only took 1 shot inside 5 feet and was only fouled once inside 5 feet. So this was really a jump shot game for Mitchell. 6 of 12, on above the break threes and
Arc threes.
Arc threes, sorry. And then
We're
another.
gonna do it. We're gonna speak it into existence.
I have it in my notes so many times.
Appropriate.
But, and then 2 of 3 on corner threes, and he was just molten at certain points in the game. Dyson Daniels is a very good overall defender. He's not the greatest, man to man, the shutdown corner type of idea. And Mitchell was able to get to his shots, but also when Mitchell's hitting his flow, we've seen it in both Utah and in Cleveland. It just sometimes even good defense doesn't work against him. And so I thought Mitchell was really what was driving his success. His absence was a lot of the really terrible stretches for the Cavs. And that could be, in certain ways, it is an indictment of Lonzo Ball, because Ball, he, in an ideal world, he would be able to run the show more often. But, I think he still is a cohesive piece for this team. I thought that his minutes with Mitchell, you had 2 guys who could move the ball. Lonzo had a couple of really nice cross-court passes to, just it never sticks with him. And he competes defensively. I think the Bulls have missed that. We brought up the opponent rim frequency. Not having Lonzo Ball has made that harder. I thought that he made a difference out there, only credited with 1 steal, but was pretty disruptive. And something that's been fascinating for Kenny Atkinson is like, well, how do you want to run your rotation without Darius Garland? And they largely have been playing at least one other ball handler with Lonzo. And so that could be Craig Porter Jr., who I thought the best thing that Craig Porter Jr. did in this win was actually rebound. He had a couple of huge offensive rebounds, had a couple of huge defensive rebounds, had a beautiful finish too. But, running the offense, I thought that stuff was a little bit hit or miss. And then they're playing Lonzo and Craig Porter Jr., but they're also playing rookie Tyrese Proctor a little bit. And, Jalen Tyson did some on-ball stuff at Cal. And so they're using kind of a patchwork quilt for the other ball handling stuff. I didn't think that was fabulous, but the Hawks challenge those guys more than most teams do. And so I think they probably, in an ideal world, would actually probably be playing some of those guys a little bit less. But the other reality is that without Max Strus, DeAndre Hunter has had an injury this year. He had a decent game, had a couple stronger moments against his former team, but they don't have the wings to play fewer guards. Like they just don't have that available right now. And so they don't really have anybody else that like they could lean on within that. Maybe they could play a little bit more of Jalen Tyson, but he's still a guard too.
Yeah, and that bad offense, again, with Mitchell having missed some time, a lot of it seems to be that they are just not really getting the conversion from some of these supporting guys. Now, Jalen Tyson is starting to hit more, but Lonzo's shooting 27%. Hunter is under 30% as well. Sam Merrill is at 51%, but he's been missing some time. He's all the way down as 9th on the team in minutes. Larry Nance, not really shooting the 3 ball much. Proctor, who is supposed to be a good 3-point shooter, is at 15%. So Mitchell has been absolutely molten to start the season, but there hasn't really been anyone else behind him who's been shooting the ball, even if they are generating these threes. That's kind of what they preach. And going back to this game, looking at these numbers in the game phase, off steals, 19 points on 9 plays running in transition, 2.1 points per play. That's basically your entire game right there in what was an 8-point Cleveland win, because the half-court offense was really bad. In fact, so if you look at the transition shooting, just overall, 8 of 9 at the rim in transition for Cleveland. In the half court, they were 4 of 8. So the Hawks really did barricade off the rim pretty well. And it was a ton of jump shots, ton of corner threes even as well. Hawks were very concerned about not giving up much at the rim, but in transition, they weren't really able to affect that much. And that's why Cleveland won this one.
Yeah, the only other thing I want to say about the Cavs, and it's not a huge surprise given the opposition, is that not the greatest game for Evan Mobley as a self-creator. I mean, they have a lot of players who can do a better job on Mobley than most, with Jalen Johnson and Risa Shea and everybody else. And I thought Risa Shea did a good job in his minutes. I thought Jalen Johnson did too in his turns. And Mobley, 14 points, but it took him 16 shots from the field to do it, and he only got to the line twice. And I thought all of that was appropriate. Like, it wasn't like he was getting fouled and it wasn't being called. And he'll have better games. He'll have more advantages, but he's grown. Evan Mobley's gotten better, but when he doesn't really have a place to beast, a place to mash, he'll have some of these games in there.
Yeah, and recall last year he was working with Mitchell. Now they tethered those two guys' minutes to one another, and then it was Garland and Jared Allen. Jared Allen also missed this game, of course, as well. And so now they're staggering those guys. Mobley has had to do a lot more. So percent of field goals assisted from Evan Mobley has definitely been down. Also noteworthy that he only has 6 dunks in 6 games. There just has not been as much space for him to operate when he has been the primary threat. I agree he's shooting it easier. He's doing more off the dribble. He's even running some pick and roll. Like, he's added some skills, but it's also still too large of a load for him at this point in time. We'll see if reinforcements coming back in the form of Jared Allen and more importantly Garland can change things. But yeah, this is not looking like the same dominant group, and a big part of that is just that some of the names you're mentioning of guys who are just not established NBA rotation players that they're playing, they trucked on with those guys, but a lot of them also were playing, in silly season at the end of the year, and they're able to win games. This is the real part of the season at the moment. Let's get to the Milwaukee Bucks.
The Bucks are 4-2 with the 8th best net rating plus 5.5, 4th on offense, 15th on defense, and BPI projects them to win 46 games, which would be the 4 seed in the East.
Yeah, interesting that they have the 4th lowest free throw attempt rate of any team after being the 3rd highest last year. Now, Damian Lillard, that was kind of the one thing that never really left him in Milwaukee. Obviously, Giannis is a big part of that as well. They don't have anyone else who's really going to draw fouls. But the big revelation for them is Ryan Rollins, who I think is probably Wally pipped KPJ. Unfortunately, that KPJ is going to be out a significant amount of time with his ankle sprain he suffered, I think, in the first game. But Ryan Rollins has now started 5 of their 6 games, 65% true shooting, and even getting 4% offensive rebounds, which is interesting. He is looking really quick. I mean, he's unrecognizable. And maybe if I cross paths with him, I'll get a chance to ask him about how it was that he's improved his body and just where he was feeling physically in Golden State. He was coming off of a foot issue and really just looked like a guy out there. I was like, man, this guy's got size, but like maybe he can shoot and handle a little bit, but it kind of reminds me a little bit, although I think Rollins is even more athletic, certainly on the defensive end, of Spencer Dinwiddie. And remember, Spencer Dinwiddie had an injury in college too, and he spent some time with Detroit and with the Bulls, and he just looked like this guy who had size and maybe could shoot a little bit, but I was like, well, what is it you do here? And then he moved to Brooklyn and suddenly was feeling better physically, and all of a sudden he was getting to the line, and he became a starting quality point guard for a couple of seasons. Now, I think Rollins is younger than him, and he also provides more pressure defensively. He's not one of the absolute best, but he will get steals. He will pressure up. I mentioned that Wednesday game, how stark the difference was in terms of Jalen Brunson's numbers when Rollins was on or off the floor. And he didn't shut down Brunson, but he just made him work, right? It wasn't one of these things where Brunson is able to just get to his spot and just knows he's going to get a shot off and score on. Brunson drew a couple of fouls on him and hit a couple of tough fadeaways, but he made Brunson work and work in a way because one of the things that I think I can do a little bit better than a lot of people is tell when someone like Brunson or Kawhi Leonard or KD, one of these mid-range masters, is like actually being bothered or when it's just a technical contest and he's just totally fine. I didn't think that Brunson was feeling that the way we've seen him many a time in the past. So he definitely adds some pace. The best thing he's doing offensively right now is driving hard to his left hand, particularly if the opponent is playing a no middle type of defense. And if I think they are weakening him to his left hand, that is actually his strong hand to attack and finish. And he just gets off the ground and he has some physical. He had one where he went right through the chest of Jakob Poeltl at the rim, and just knocked him backwards and scored. He gets really good extension with that left hand when he's getting to the corner of the backboard. It seems like when he gets into the lane, he's always going to try to find a way to Euro to his left or finish left, which has been catching some people by surprise. If he's going to be starting, I think he'll have to make a little bit of adjustment as the scouting report catches up to him, because I'm not gonna say he's a one-trick pony, but he definitely had like one thing that he really wanted to do. But he's got enough in the mid-range where he can pull up, and of course he's been hitting the jump shot from three as well. He's able to hit off the dribble or as a spot up guy. But yeah, he's actually one of the more, when it's a combination of size, strength, and athleticism, he's kind of in the, maybe not the top quartile, but maybe that next group of point guards in the league, and he applies that athleticism. And so I think he's been really solid. Still committing a few too many fouls on jump shooters. He's not like unbelievable. And then the bigger his offensive role becomes, obviously, the less effective he's going to be on defense. But to get this guy on a $4 million a year deal, thank God for him, he got that player option on the third year of that. I've said it before, but the league just totally missed on him. I was saying that he should have been offered at least high single digits, if not even close to the mid-level, based on what I saw from him last year. He hadn't quite established it at that level, but I think you take shots on contracts like that, and because you could just get a great value as opposed to just, overpaying for someone who's established. So really impressed. Did you want to add anything on Rollins?
Yeah, I think that the most important thing for the Bucks that Rollins, about like statistically with Rollins, is that Rollins on, Giannis off. They still have a 118 offensive rating, including the glass version. And they need to have that floor, because Giannis is going to, he's going to be off the floor for just the normal ebbs and flows in the game. And he's going to be, they won that game against the Warriors, the Ryan Rollins revenge game, with Giannis totally out. And I think that it's not the building blocks for like a perfect point guard. I wish his passing was better, but to be an effective player, to be somebody that teams have to deal with, I think that he has all the stuff there. And you brought up Dinwiddie, which is a fascinating comparison. Dinwiddie, so his first year in Brooklyn, where he showed some signs, was his age 23 season, which is the age that Rollins is now. But the bigger breakout, like he was in the 6-man conversation, that was 2 years later. That was when he was age 25. So how this little run goes for Ryan Rollins will help see it. And then, I mean, he's going from being, like a 40 in the 40s, granted it was a small sample, on twos, to 63% so far this year. Like it might end up falling back to earth a little bit, but that's going to be a key number to watch with Rollins.
Yeah, other key numbers for the Milwaukee Bucks. This is something that really came up in my discussion with Eric Name, is that they're going to shoot the ball. That was the formula. They're going to put good shooters around Giannis. Kyle Kuzma actually hasn't been as atrocious as he was, but everyone else, very established shooter at this point. They are fourth in three-point percentage, 40.4%. Even Giannis is shooting pretty well from three on his limited attempts. That's the biggest thing on them, getting to be fourth on offense. But they're also third in two-point percentage at 61.7%. So they are spacing the floor. Miles Turner, of course, is a big part of that too, and getting to the basket. But the one problem with the way they space the floor is Giannis has the ball, or he's driving. Bobby Portis and Miles Turner are spacing out, and Doc Rivers is their coach, which means they're 29th in offensive rebounding. And so that, in today's day and age, when offensive rebounding is starting to become more important, that's something that if they could even just get that up, like we were talking about with the Bulls, to like, 23rd or something, that would help their math a lot. But they're at 19% offensive rebounds right now, which hurts them some in the math game, but still fourth in offense. If the shooting regresses, though, that'll be something to maybe keep an eye on. All right, where are we going next here?
Let's go to the reigning Eastern Conference champions, the Indiana Pacers, who are off the schneid.
Yeah, 1-5 now for the Indiana Pacers. They beat the Golden State Warriors in a very frustrating game for one. Steve Kerr. Their negative 8.7 net rating is 27th. Obviously, they've had 800 billion injuries, and despite their beautiful offense, they are 29th in offense, 14th on defense, and they project for 33 wins, which BPI says will be the 12th seed, 2% chance of making the playoffs. Now, as of Sunday morning, they're still the 5th fastest time to shot overall. They are pushing it really hard as you can, particularly when they haven't really had a healthy point guard available. Maybe Andrew Nemhard could be back in the next couple of games. And the other thing that they are doing, as they always have under Rick Carlisle, is holding down opponent three-point attempt rate. They're fifth lowest there, that applies to both corner and arc threes. But so I think it's a pretty impressive, given the lack of cohesiveness, that the defense is 14th right now. Warriors led at 88-82 going into the fourth, and the Pacers starting and closing lineup of Quentin Jackson, Aaron Nesmith, Jarris Walker, Pascal Siakam, and Isaiah Jackson came back.
They really did. And I thought that the comeback wasn't just on the praise on that should not just go on those five individuals. I thought that a really important part of the story of their comeback actually was a table set before that, which was in the early part of the fourth quarter. And especially strategy stream listeners will know that I bring this up all the time, is the Pacers drew a bunch of fouls in the very beginning of the quarter. And I had it in my notes. I'm like, oh, I wonder if this is going to end up mattering. And the answer is yes. In the fourth quarter, just the fourth quarter, the Golden State Warriors committed 9 fouls, and that led to the Pacers getting 14 free throws. They were 13 of 14 in just that period. So that's 14 of their 32 points in the quarter 13 were at the free throw line. And so that made an absolutely huge difference. And overall, it wasn't a huge surprise, but particularly in the fourth quarter, the Pacers it didn't seem like they were generating a ton of great stuff in the half court in the early going, but they were getting just enough. And as you would expect from the Pacers, they're getting a lot in transition. They ended up with more transition plays than the Warriors, more transition points than the Warriors, which is not a huge surprise considering how they play, but super impressive to do that when the guards that you have at your disposal, the players that could do that. I mean, Quentin Jackson, I thought, did a very good job overall, but the Pacers still looking this Pacersy with the guys they have available. It's consistently surprising me.
Yeah, and they had basically 3 guys who did all of their scoring. Siakam with 27, you expect from him. Aaron Nesmith had 31, and he was 5-11 for 3. And then Jackson was the other guy. He had 10 assists, 25 points, and was plus 20 on the game. Really caused problems as well. Steph Curry had his worst game in a long time, 8 of 23 from the field, 4 of 16 from 3, and 5 turnovers. Team worst, negative 21. You don't see that very often from Steph Curry. So the Pacers had a lot to do with that. And still, Golden State was largely in control. And then they just totally punted the game away at the very end.
It was a mixture of for the Warriors / Pacers of offensive foibles and then straight up like defensive mistakes. Like we talked about this, it came up a little bit in some of the other Warriors games we've discussed, but like there was a play where Al Horford ended up, through a switch, he ended up guarding Quentin Jackson. It's confusing because they had 2 Jacksons in the starting closing lineup, but he left Quentin Jackson, the point guard, and Jackson just walks into a 3, and that was one of the key shots that helped get the Pacers back into it. That made it from a 5-point deficit to a 2-point deficit. But really, I think, and this is a mixture of the Pacers doing things well and the Warriors doing things poorly, is that Curry made one of his few 3-pointers. He was 4-16 from 3 in this game to put the Warriors up 104-93 with 6:05 to go. In the ensuing 6:05, the Golden State Warriors score 5 points. And that was Steph had a runner. Steph he split free throws. Does it usually split free throws? And then Jimmy Butler got an and one where he also missed the free throw. Like those are the only points they scored during that stretch. There were a few, missed. They generated an open corner 3 for Jonathan Kuminga that he missed, a few other ones. But I thought that the Pacers did a really good job staying connected, making those shots hard. And sure, Stephen Curry missing a free throw, Stephen Curry missing a bunch of threes. Like that isn't just great defense. But I thought that the Pacers, the activity level, the communication they earned at least part of that.
Yeah, anything that stuck out to you just about some of these individual players? What was Jackson doing? How was he getting his points? Because he's not really a player whose offensive game I'm particularly familiar with.
I was impressed. I saw so Quentin Jackson did a move, and I'm like, oh, that was a nice move. And then thankfully after the game, Caitlin Cooper did her breakdown and called it a Pinoy step. And so basically what that is you pick up your dribble, you do a shot fake on the first step, and that totally got Quentin post. And then you do the actual shot on the second step. So you drew the big, got him up in the air, and then had the finish. It was a really we're seeing it a little bit more often in the league, but I thought it was another piece of craft that we're seeing. And I thought that Jackson, he was 3 of 4 from 3. Those were more of the kind of standstill, get it within the flow variety, but that's fine. I mean, if you can generate some of those shots, you can do it. And so I thought that Jackson, more comfortable with the ball in his hands than I'd seen before. And he's not a perfectly intuitive passer, but he was not being selfish and he was making the right read at the right time enough to generate stuff. So I thought that was he had more nuance to his offensive game than I'd seen before. Jackson's kind of floated around. I believe he was on a two-way last year, or at least was on two-way for part of the season last year.
Yeah,
and
he
so
spent time in the Wizard system as
yeah,
well.
that's right. And so I thought that he did a nice job of getting, at times it was getting downhill. There was this really good play. So it was interior passing, but it was interior passing that was actually set up by a cut to the interior, which is weird because the Pacers, their spacing isn't always fabulous. But Jackson kind of ran in there, and what that gave him was a passing angle for what ended up being a really nice pass to Isaiah Jackson for 2 free throws. That cut the deficit to 105-104. And cutting in, and this is another thing for those who read Caitlin Cooper, that was really good in her breakdown piece. I noticed it as well, but she talked about how cutting in, you could say you and I have used the term of a Caspi cut, where you kind of go in and you mess up your own team's offense. But what that one did is Jimmy Butler was the low man. It kind of messed up where he thought he should be. And so he moved out of position, and that opened up that interior pass to Isaiah Jackson. So it could not work. You could see these circumstances, especially when they don't have the greatest spacing on the floor, even though Siakam has gotten more confident, wasn't making them in this one. So I thought that Jackson had more going on. Siakam really carried them at certain moments down the stretch, not only by making shots, but also by making the right pass. Like he set up, I brought up that Quentin Jackson 3-pointer. He set that up. And there were also plays where the Warriors just completely screwed up. And there was one that really stuck out. And so it's a 107-106 Warriors lead. And Pascal Siakam kind of tries to get into the paint on Jonathan Kuminga. Kuminga did a pretty good job staying with him. But Jarris Walker gets the offensive rebound. The Warriors have 3 guys in the paint. They're going hard for the defensive board. And no one reacted to the rebound. And then nobody went, oh crap, we don't have the ball. We need to get back to the guys who are out there. So eventually the ball finds Quentin Jackson, who's just standing out there on the yard. Like Jonathan Kuminga could have gotten out there. Curry could have gotten out there. And instead it just creates a wide open 3. And so that was a big mistake for them instead. So that takes a 1-point lead to a 2-point Pacers lead. And Jimmy Butler drives down the next possession, gets the and one, but misses the free throw. So it stays a tie game instead of going in. And then you brought up how it was potentially frustrating for Steve Kerr. This is the play, the other one that really stuck out. So Curry was on Pascal Siakam. And so I thought Siakam was going to try to back him down, try to draw a foul, something else. The Pacers lived in the bonus in the fourth quarter. And Siakam passed out of it. You're like, okay, they're not generating a ton of good stuff. But it looked like Kuminga was going to kind of get Curry out of the way. But when Siakam passed, they both left Pascal Siakam. He's just wide open and takes the 3. And so the Warriors...
That's a Kuminga mistake.
Because
Curry should scram. Kuminga should have stayed there.
Exactly. And so Pascal Siakam... So there were 2 possessions in a row where there was a jumbling, and the Pacers get a wide open three, takes it from a 2-point deficit to a 3-point lead because Jimmy Butler had the shot in between. And then, so Kerr can be mad at them for that. I was going to ask you, I was like, watch it in my notes. I was like, okay, Siakam, Kuminga missed a corner three. The Warriors are down 3 with a 4-second differential. They do have a timeout remaining, and they don't foul, they don't do anything else. And so that's putting a lot of eggs in the getting a stop basket, getting the rebound basket. Quentin Jackson drives on Draymond Green, makes a hard bank shot with 6 seconds left, and it's just over.
Yeah, I think I would have also played it out with a 4-second differential. I think when you get below 3, that's when it gets really dicey. But I mean, you saw he took the shot with 6 seconds. He misses. You can get the rebound. You have maybe even more than 4 seconds. It's tough for some teams, particularly an inexperienced one like this Indiana group, to run the time down. So I think 4 seconds to me is like a clear don't foul in that circumstance down 3, because especially like I mean, I guess you could do it early, but if you can keep it to one possession and you're going to get one more chance, like most circumstances you're going to. Obviously, an offensive rebound, if they score, you're not going to.
For me, that line is usually about 6 because of the time the ball spends in the air, especially if you want it to miss, and so it's going to take some time to secure it. But yeah, if he had missed that shot, they would have had enough. And with that tight a turnaround, I mean, Curry's not the greatest in these circumstances due to his size, but you're probably actually going to get a 3 off because it's hard to foul because you're getting into the shot so quickly.
All right, ready to move on to the Knicks?
Yes, let's do it. And so the New York Knicks are 3-3 after dispatching the Chicago Bulls on Sunday. They are 3-3, and they are still below water. I mean, I guess they're 3-3 in net rating, negative 0.3, 14th on offense, 20th on defense. BPI still optimistic. 49 wins would be the 3 seed.
Yeah, some somewhat disturbing news about Josh Hart. It is kind of interesting how when guys have a good game, this is when this stuff will come out a little bit. But he has been struggling with this hand issue after re-injuring it playing pickup over the season. Or over the offseason, excuse me.
Yeah, I saw it first from Tim Bontemps that he doesn't have full feeling in his shooting hand. And Hart's quote after the game was, "Yeah, my nerve hasn't fully gotten back to what it was before. So it's a little bit of tingling, a little bit of numbness in part of my hand. Hopefully at some point that nerve goes back to where it was. Hopefully sooner rather than later, but right now it's a process."
Yeah, and that's a point that I want to make here after we go through talking about just some of the stylistic things that have changed. Because obviously the results have not been good so far, even though they started 2-0, and the offense hasn't been great. But maybe it's the ingredients right now in addition to the cooks. But let's do a little bit of comparison, right? Because we're going to go through some of these factors that we were focused on about why it might have made sense to move on from Tom Thibodeau. And Mike Don may not have been their first choice, but I think he was a reasonable one to try to fix some of these things given his experience in Golden State and Sacramento. So he has gotten them to pass the basketball more. Last year, 281 passes per game. This year, 314. Last year, 44.6 potential assists per game. And potential assist is a shot or a pass that leads to a shot, whether it goes in or not. So they're up by 3 this year. They're at 47.2. However, interestingly enough, last year, they averaged 27.5 assists per game. This year, only 23.8. Now, part of that is that they're taking a lot more threes. So just you can't have an assist unless it goes in. And if you're taking threes, your points per shot might be higher, but the actual number of shots and thus the assist generated could be a little bit lower. But they clearly have not been as efficient when last year they were the number 5 offense overall, though they struggled some once the year turned over. What about playing faster? How does that compare this year to last year, Danny?
They're a little bit faster, but not much faster. So last year, they were 23rd in transition frequency. They were 26th in time to shot. The 23rd is up to 20th. The 26th is, or sorry, 20. They went from 29th to 26th in time to shot. So they're better in both, but they're still bottom third, basically.
All right. How about moving the ball a little bit more? The way that shots are generated, if you look at their play type data from last year and compare that to this year, what stands out to you there?
I mean, the plays that keep things still the most are isolations and post ups. Last year, 7.8% isolations, 5.1% of their possessions were post ups. That doesn't include the passes. It's just kind of what resulted in a shot. The 7.8 in isolation, that is down to 5.7. So that's a material drop. And in post ups, from 5.1 all the way down to 2.4. So there's a real reduction in the things that are most ball stopping.
Yeah, now pick and roll ball handler, that's about the same. And Jalen Brunson's usage is actually up, as we will discuss. Transition percentage, that was actually higher last year in terms of the number of plays in transition. There are many ways to measure transition. Again, I think Josh Hart not being in the starting lineup, but also being the guy who really pushed the ball off the dribble, got to the basket. Him just not being right, not playing as much up until today is a big part of that as well. And then the other thing that's huge is they've gone from 23% of their possessions to plays to 33% of their plays being spot ups. Now, some of those could be spot ups and drives, but these are people attacking off a closeout or taking the shot in some form or fashion. Although they were in the 70th percentile in such plays last year, they actually shot a good percentage from three, 50th percentile this year. What about Jalen Brunson? Last year, he was at 29% usage. This year, 33%. What about Karl Anthony Towns doing more ball handling? Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby being featured more. If you compare just the amount of time that these guys are on the ball in terms of time of possession, Jalen Brunson, his time of possession has gone down slightly. So he's attacking more with less time of possession. He was 8.6 minutes of time of possession last year. We don't get these numbers in like a perfect per possession, but you'll have to bear with us that it's not perfect there. So last year, Jalen Brunson, 8.6 minutes of possession per game, average seconds per touch, 6 seconds. This year, that's gone down a little bit. He actually has more touches per game this year at 99.6 compared to 85.4, but he has a lower time of possession, about a minute less, and his average time seconds per touch is down to 4.7 from 6 a year ago. So they at least are getting more ball movement with the passes and less holding the ball, so that's good. What about in terms of some of these other guys here, Towns, Bridges, and Anunoby? There are other 3 main guys that look like they're seeing more of the ball.
So Towns' time per touch is very similar. It's in the low 2s, 2.11 to 2.02. In terms of the total number of touches, it's actually exactly the same, 36.7 to 36.7 to 36.2. I thought it was exactly the same. It's within fractions of a point. For OG Anunoby, he had 32.
Yeah, and that's front court touches, by the way. That's
touches,
what I should have stated for Brunson, but the ratio is similar for him.
Mm-hmm.
Front court touches to overall touches.
And then for OG Anunoby, last year he had 30.4 front court touches per game at 2 seconds per touch. This year he has 32.8, so a little bit of an uptick, 2.17 per touch. So he's actually gone up a little bit, but he has a slightly different role within the offense.
Yeah, Mikal Bridges, his time possession per game is 3.3 minutes, and last year it was 2.3. So he's really been featured more. Not really actually taking that many more shots, but when they've been trying to bring Brunson off the ball more with Hart not in the starting lineup, that was the big thing too. Last year, Hart was actually second in time of possession per game, and he also played 37.6 minutes a game last year, which is insane. And he just hasn't really particularly featured this year. He's at 22.3 minutes, and he's only played 4 games. So he's just playing a lot less, getting a lot less time possession. Most of that has gone to Bridges. Towns, actually, his time possession per game is down. And then Anunoby, his has gone up as well, but still not a ton. And then if you talk about Brunson's dribbling, he was at 6 dribbles per touch. He's at 4.4 this year. Again, a lot of that is just that he's not bringing the ball up as well. So they're definitely doing some things differently. Now, how well is it working? Well, I guess in terms of the actual result of the offense, there is one major thing that stands out in terms of the type of shots they're generating.
Oh, yeah. And that is the three-pointer. So last year, the New York Knicks, I'll use the cleaning the glass version of the stat. The New York Knicks were 27th in three-point attempt frequency. 35% of their shots were threes. 35.1 if we're going to be specific. This year, that 35.1 is 45.8. They went from 27 to 3rd so far. Most corner threes, 12th most arc threes after being second lowest in arc threes last year.
However, some other things haven't really worked out well. I mentioned Brunson's usage is up. Mikal Bridges has been very efficient so far, shooting it better. And he's actually getting to the foul line way more. That's the one thing that does stand out, is that he's been more aggressive. He's more than doubled his infinitesimal free throw rate from a year ago, but he's got 16% usage rather than 20% usage. And OG Anunoby is actually slightly lower usage by about 1% this year. And then Karl Towns, his usage is also lower as well. And I think this isn't a great way to judge things yet, because they've had Mitchell Robinson now for 2 games. And Josh Hart coming into tonight was shooting 21% from the field. And then Karl Towns is really, really struggling with this quad issue. He's shooting it poorly from 3. That the decline in post-ups, I think, has mostly been Karl. And then, but his drives haven't been as good either. And so his offensive game, he just hasn't been able to generate as many shots. And even when he's being staggered, this would be his lowest usage percentage in a very long time, under 25%. And he's still turning it over quite a bit as well. So go ahead.
Yeah, and on kind of combine a couple of those things together, the Knicks have gone from 9th in effective field goal percentage to 27th so far this year. But a big portion of that is that they're 7% weaker at the rim. And so that's including the glass that's inside 4 feet. And then they're currently they're converting 11.5% worse from 4 to 14 feet. So those things you expect to improve with time.
Yeah, I hope so. And we'll see how getting Robinson into the mix more changes things. He had a little scare with a sprained right ankle. It's the left foot, an ankle that have given him all the trouble, but he was able to return against Chicago. But still a reminder that he probably should be playing 20 minutes a game and not playing back-to-backs. And it is a little dicey. I mean, I do think that that's their best lineup, so you want to start it, but also you need a backup center unless they want to go with Ariel Hagporty. Maybe they should consider going with Hagporty, though Hagporty hasn't been particularly good. Gershon Yabusele was supposed to give them a lot. He's really now has only played 45 minutes on the season coming into today, and hasn't been able to hit shots either. Mostly just has been hanging around taking threes like that. He could maybe be a source of more rim pressure. And so I'm not going to tell you that Mike Brown's offense is the reason that all of these guys are just playing poorly right now. And it's also very early. So, if they get Towns healthy and Hart isn't dealing with this hand issue anymore, like Brunson, Bridges, and Anunoby, I think are looking pretty good. Basically everyone else on the team, it's been a struggle for them. And so they're just they're going to have to dominate on offense. We talked about their defensive limitations. Those were very much on display in both of these Bulls games, even though they won today. Their offense looked a lot better playing against that Bulls defense as well. Statistical monster though it's been. But
speaking of, in the next 4 games they play, or in the next 4 games they play 3 of the bottom 4 defenses. They play the Wizards, the Nets, and the Grizzlies, also the Wolves. But that if they're still struggling, then could be a little bit more concerned.
All right, well, we are going to finish this out a little bit later. I got to work on these muscles to do 2.5 hour recording podcasts. It is now 11 p.m. Pacific, and so we're going to call it quits for today. We'll get to the rest of the 15 and 60 tomorrow. Talk to y'all then.